Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who will probably also fall prey to that mimic someday.
Tim Longo.
That dang mimic.
I assume so. I haven't met it. Is there only just the one?
I'm not going to tell you where. I will also not tell you. So it's another one of these enemies that, you know, if you fight it once, it goes away, and it's not really a boss. Like, it's not hidden behind a wall of fog or smoke or whatever. Yeah. It's also not a special wall of fog that you can't go through, as I was mentioning in pre-show. It's just out there. So every chest should now be terrifying to you. Because he killed me. He just straight up ate me when I approached him. So
how funny! What are you supposed? So and then he goes away.
I gotta tell you where. What's that?
And then he goes away.
He goes away after you kill. You have to kill him. But yes, once he's dead, he's gone for good.
Got it. Oh, he's like a sub boss. Yeah,
exactly. He's like a Black Knight type.
Yeah.
Same.
Does he give something good? Does he drop something?
No.
Good, no,
I don't think he dropped anything really valuable. It was like a straight up annoying. He might have dropped a ring or something like that. I have 9 of them now, so it's kind of hard to remember where they all came from.
Yeah.
I've got around that. I don't know exactly how many. I can probably tell you. I have a couple. I have at least 2 that are from the heroes that I think are in the intro video. I feel like one gives me better criticals if I'm using it, like more damage on my crits. So that's if you counter or you parry, or
backstab.
Or if you attack from behind. Yeah, either of those is a crit. So that, yeah, there have been things where I've done damage with that from behind, and it's just like, whoa! I didn't know I could do that kind of damage when I had that ring on. And then the other one I wear commonly is the wolf ring, which is a
I just got that one,
which you found. Yeah. So you had the same thing where you went. We'll kind of get around to your bosses now. Since you went to the Moonlit Butterfly and went all the way to the end of that path and came back, that tree had moved.
So it didn't move. That's why I was waiting for it. I was trying to remember what you said triggered the move for you, but I didn't say. I just killed the tree.
Oh, really? So you just attack the tree?
I just attack it. It doesn't attack you. It doesn't do anything.
Wow. Okay.
You just attack. It's. I guess it's almost like
not what I expected from Tim Longo Jr., former forest ranger. I just I'm here. I'm like, I'm not going to hurt a tree, and you're just like, well, that thing's in my way.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like another. I don't know if they do this in other places, but because there's a second one later, right?
Yes.
It felt like just another version of a hidden wall, hidden room or something like that's. I don't know, because it doesn't attack. I don't know. It didn't attack me back. But it did have a health bar, and you just kind of keep slashing, and then eventually goes away, and it actually gives you souls too.
Oh, that's amazing, because for me, I did finally work out, because I did it again. If you go all the way past where the Moonlit Butterfly is, all the way to the end where the dead blacksmith is, and come back, it has moved.
Oh, okay. So
you come back and it's out of place. It's actually starting to block the exit. It's not. It doesn't quite. It never does, as far as I can tell. And then you go down, and the other one has also moved out of the way, so you can go down there and kill those weird red frog.
Yeah,
those things are so creepy.
Yeah, they're pretty. Those are pretty rough. Yeah,
with that weird flat flap that they have around. Ugh,
yeah,
they have this weird body skirt. Ugh,
yeah,
gross.
Yeah.
Those things are super gross. They give they drop these leaves that give you stamina.
Yeah, the green
faster stamina replenishment. So I'm like, I'm gonna remember this place. I'm thinking, because I went back there and got some more, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally need to remember this when I'm fighting a boss. Note: have never remembered that when I'm fighting a boss. So it's not yet paid off, but yeah.
Yeah,
so you fought the butterfly.
I fought. Yeah, so I basically did. So I was beating my head against the wall with the Capra Demon for a while, because I had the basement key, and so I actually forgot where the doors could have been to open that. So it actually took me a little while even just to find that. So then I went down, obviously did Undead Burg, lower Undead Burg with the, the assassins and the dogs, and sort of there's a guy down there that is behind a door that you probably opened by now, but he's like, let me out. And so I didn't figure that out. I assume that's later.
Yeah, it's not, you can just do it then. I think you can just break down the door with your weapon.
Oh, I thought I tried that. Oh, funny. I thought maybe the master key would be it. So I guess I'll go back there and do that.
I didn't do anything special. I don't think. I don't. That was quite a while ago, so I don't really remember.
So anyway,
we should. While I'm saying that, hours and levels. I'm at 66 hours in level 75. Tim's in the low 30s and playtime of 21 hours. So I played 14 hours this week, and you played 7, just to keep us on track. So people who have a scorecard at home.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, yeah, I just can't keep up with the hour count, right? So
yeah, I know.
But I did, like, separate from that, this last week, I definitely was a good, like, I felt like I made good progress.
Yeah, you definitely did. You definitely did.
About two main bosses, and then odds and ends, and then found a lot of new areas, and then about 10 or 11.
And you found some other cool. You found some cool stuff in pre-show. We won't talk about because I haven't found one of the things you found. I was like, oh, no way. There's another blacksmith, basically. And I don't want to know where it is because I'm like, oh, well, I have to go back.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. Yeah, you'll find it eventually. It's a little bit off the beaten path, but it's not like behind us, invisible wall or anything. I did find that one that you mentioned in, just not too far into
in dark
route. Yeah. And though I don't have the I'm not online, I don't have the I don't have the messages to tell me where it is. If you look, the reason I found it is because the artwork looks pretty obvious that there's something there. So
it's
I
like
just
an archway type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I slashed. You might even be able to hear the fire behind it. I forget. But anyway.
I think that's often true. Like, you can often go up to spaces and hear things that are on the other sides of walls, which is definitely like PS3 era. Like, they're not going to be doing audio occlusion and things like that on that hardware. It was pretty decent audio hardware, but like, they're not going to, unless that's what your game's about. They're not, most games, especially a game like this whose budget was definitely less than, big AAA titles at the time. From Software has kind of always been in that other space of like, they're sort of like what used to be a sort of like B tier. It feels like, in terms of
for production
money, for production
value.
Yeah. I mean, just guessing. I mean, and not to say that it's a B movie, just like the amount of money spent is not, the same as like whatever the biggest Assassin's Creed or whatever at the time, or some EA title.
Yeah, they're focusing on systems and mechanics and gameplay more than art production or like fidelity and things like that. So I'm playing the remastered version, so I think it probably looks better, but yeah, I mean, it's and there's sort of a jankiness quality to it that obviously is beloved, and part of the whole thing, which is, just ironically, just having played Bethesda game, sort of similar conversation there. And it's not a judgment. It's just part of the experience of it. Like I feel like every time I fight any boss, there's so much, jank going on in a good way.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I just before this, I beat Sif, which is this wolf with the big sword in its mouth. And, the reason I lost to it the first time was basically like just being overwhelmed by like, oh my God, look at the size of that thing. And then killing me in a couple swipes and just being like, I don't even know what, oh no. And then I was dead. But there's also just like, because it's so big, its ability to move in the space is pretty constrained. It does some big jumps like the Taurus demon does, or I don't know, other things have done where they jump around a lot, but it seems to be based on the line between us. So it's like trying to jump away. And like, there's places where if it jumps away, it would essentially jump out of the arena or whatever that it's in. And so it kind of jumps up into a space where it can't hit me, but I can get under it and hit it until it jumps again. So there's been like these weird, like, edge cases where it's like, if you were super polished, you could spend the time engineering an AI that does something very different and spends a lot of, but all of that is just, that's extra time and money and maybe animations, and on the PS3 with less memory available to that, typically, like it's that split memory architecture between GPU and CPU that I think we've talked about before. So you just can't, it's just different, and so it's like you just can't just constantly add stuff. You probably could afford more with that. I think it's probably more of a time thing than a resource thing, like a system resource thing, but would be my guess. But still, it's just like, that's just extra wax, that you're sanding away and polishing.
Well, they clearly, and again, I don't want this to sound like we're criticizing their quality of their stuff, but they're clearly making, there's certain things that are important to them and certain things that are not important to them, and they've made very distinct decisions about that, which I completely respect. And the Capra Demon, just because I don't have the boss depth that you have, or breadth rather, that you have, so I'll just use one that I know we both know. The Capra Demon for me is a good example, because the way that boss acts is not the way, it doesn't match the space, right? Like he has really big swords, 2 of them, and he swings really widely, and he pretty much hits the walls every time he swings or something, and it's a very constrained space. And, typically if you're, like, I feel like a Nintendo boss, right, takes the abilities into account with the level design, and everything is sort of like,
a dude with big swords would never be in this confined space, right? I mean, you would give him lots of space, but you would give the player space too, so that they could move out of the way. And it's a totally different aesthetic. I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, we put this thing in here, and actually the fact that he's slamming into the walls a bit is to your benefit, right?
Yeah.
Because you're meeting it early. Spoilers, there are more Capra Demons later.
Yeah, exactly. And the camera's terrible in that room, right? It's very small. Like it's hard sometimes to, like, because my whole, most of my strategies are about rolling, right? So I'm always having to, like, roll into walls and then turn around, and then my camera's messed up, and it depends on if I'm locked onto them or not. And you got to unlock onto him certain times so you don't kind of run the wrong direction. It's just kind of a mess in there, really. And visibility, you need to see what he's doing as much as possible so you can dodge his attacks, etc. But anyway, it's just, the point being is, like, they don't, not only is it advantageous for them to have him hit the walls and stuff, but also, like, he clips through everything. He's way too big for the space. Like, it just it just isn't, kind of a typical approach, and I think that that's okay, but in a weird way, it also makes him, for me, it makes him really terrifying, because it's like, it's like putting, it's putting this big dude in this tiny place and throwing you in there, and
there's nowhere to go.
There's nowhere to go, and so
there's 2 other dogs after you beside. So it's just this whole that space was a nightmare for me. It took me quite a while to get past that.
It took me many tries.
And in fact, I think I finally got to the point where I was like, I actually started thinking about the space and, like, what does this space let me do?
Exactly.
And started, that was at a point where I was starting to spend a lot more time dodging. I had put up my, I guess, endurance. Yeah. So early on, my main attributes are faith and strength. And now some of that is changing a little bit, but my main attributes are faith and strength. I'm like, okay, I've been leaning into that. It gives me good heals. The faith also gives me more damage with a divine weapon, which I have. So it's like, there's lots of things that are great. Yeah. Because I have this divine mace, right, that I've put all this, all these, whatever's into, all these Titanites or whatever. I do more damage when I raise my faith, as well as when I raise my strength. So sometimes I choose one or the other depending on what I want to do. But anyway, my endurance had been low going into that guy, and so I actually had farmed a bit just to raise my endurance, so that I could dive more easily in there. And I was still at the time really investing in light armors because you can dive better, or dodge rather, and roll and stuff. I'm now at a point where I've switched to a very heavy armor, and now I roll by basically like flipping onto my back and standing up. It's like they take frames out of the animation. It's hilarious, and it makes, if you have the audio, it's like clank, clank, clank as I,
funny, how funny.
Fall onto my butt, flip over onto my side, stand up, and all of those are these big clanking sounds. It's so absurd. I remember wild. This from beginning Demon Souls. Like at the beginning of Demon Souls, I couldn't do certain things because I couldn't get past that dragon because I couldn't dive fast enough. In that, and on that bridge, I couldn't get past it, like before get out of the range of that. And I remember grinding for the same reason there, of like, I need to raise my endurance enough or lower my weight limit enough to get through that more quickly. Right. There's probably multiple ways to do that. So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, I ended up giving up on the Capra for a while after I had gone down, to lower, and then basically decided to both grind and just explore my options, so I knew I could go to Black Root. Is that what it's called?
Dark Root.
Dark Root. I always get that wrong. Dark Root. So I that's where, obviously I did the Moth eventually. And then I explored the catacombs a little bit. Like I, just kind of practiced on the skeletons. But what I did, a lot of it is I kind of like farmed the undead Parish and Berg overall, and both leveled up my gear and also got a bunch of the objects for the fire, so I could modify weapons and repair weapons and stuff from the fire. Right, so I have all of those, and so it's just
the bonfire. Yeah.
It's the amount of souls is nothing compared to what you're getting. But for me, it's like definitely took some farming to do that stuff, so eventually I got to the Moth. And I mean, and then so I found an NPC. I went back to Firelink and kind of was a little bit more thoughtful about exploring Firelink. And the guy that you save under the bell tower of the gargoyles was there.
Yes. Okay.
So I talked to him, and then he disappeared. He's not there now, but he gave me a medallion. And then there's a woman that was there I didn't know was there behind a grate, and she upgraded my Estus flasks to a +1. I don't know what that does, but
that took your fire sprite. So you did do that.
It did do that just because she's right by where that other guy was, and I was like, "Who's this woman? She's not talking, but she's just behind this grate. Like, is she imprisoned or what the heck?" And so,
wow. So you have some very different parts of your experience, because I don't have that NPC at all.
You don't have that woman is not there?
No.
What? The silent woman that's not talking, and she's behind a grate right across from where that golden knight was sitting?
I mean, when you say she's a silent woman, I get that she's not talking. But no, I'm not I don't know who you're talking about. So I don't know how you have that person.
I don't know either.
That's so wild. Oh my God, this game, man. There's so many weird...
There's a path back. There's a path by there too. Have you gone down that path? The stairs that go down there? Have you met ghosts?
No. Oh my gosh. So there's like a whole path I haven't found.
Oh my gosh, dude.
So that's probably how you got the NPC.
I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, don't tell me. Yeah. Oh, that's wild.
God,
there's a whole...
Yeah. I did some exploring down there. I didn't go too far. Like, I don't even want to spoil it now because there's a whole
no.
thing
I
down there.
I don't want to know. Oh yeah. So now I'm like, I mean, I've basically, the Firelink Shrine has been a place that I run through. Like, I don't spend any time there. I've got a lot of NPCs who've gone there because of different things. People I've rescued, or there's one extremely strange NPC there that people who have played the game will know what I'm talking about. And Tim has heard snoring, which is amazing. Like, I also didn't hear that. I don't play the game with the audio really very far up. just because I'm often playing like early in the morning and I don't like my rumble goes off. Like I have a powerful subwoofer just behind the scenes thing here in my living room. So like I don't want my neighbors to like hear me playing, this stuff and rattling their walls in the early morning. Anyway, beside the point, like I don't spend any time there. It's definitely like, oh, I came through here. I wanted to see this priest who will sell me stuff and then remind myself, oh yeah, I don't want anything that he's selling. Like that literally happens all the time.
Yeah.
I come and I talk to this guy. I'm like, oh, that's right. You have this one thing that's really expensive and might be useful. It's a talisman, which is what I need to cast spells. I never have tons of souls when I'm going through there because I've already leveled up before I go back through there. It's like I go there and I'm like, oh, I'll go down to the catacombs and try that for a little while. One time I got totally worked. I'm like, oh, screw that. Another time I'm like, I'm coming through here. I'm going back up into the cathedral so I can go to the blacksmith up there. I don't spend any time there.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
So that's super interesting. So now I'm like, okay, well, that's another thing I haven't done.
Yeah, interesting. I was going to ask you if you'd gone because I don't even want to say what's down there, but it's a whole thing. It looks like a whole thing. So
I look forward to it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think you'll like it. It's pretty surprising. Also, kind of like what's down there. So yeah,
I mean, there's been stuff I've seen since the beginning of the game. There's a body with a glowing whatever, come pick me up soul thing.
Yeah,
and it's probably useless to me. It's probably 400 souls or something like that now, or 800. It's like 200, 400, 800 or something like that for the first few soul of a.
You're talking about the one on top of a temple there.
Well, no, there's one on this bridge when you at the beginning of the game when you're going up Undeadburg.
It's a ring.
Did you? Okay. Oh, is it? Well,
yeah.
I got freaking rings for days, so I don't know if I need that.
So it's a specific ring. Well, do you want me to tell you, or do you care?
Tell me because
So it's a one-use ring that you maybe have found others of, and if you wear it when you die, you don't lose anything.
Amazing.
But it expends the ring, so you will lose the ring, but you don't lose your souls.
Amazing. I feel like
it's probably like there's probably more than one of those, but yeah.
I feel like I've seen that, but I don't know what that is.
I forget the name of the ring, but yeah. So there's
so much stuff this game.
Yeah, I cheesed my way over to that thing to get it. I mean, not really, but because it's not really built for it. But there's these little ledges you can kind of sidle on.
Okay, yeah. I wondered if you could kind of like just physically get there.
Yeah, that's
hilarious. That's almost a joke too, right? In that, like. At the beginning of the game, you might put that on thinking, oh man, I really want to preserve these, 350 souls I have.
Yeah.
And by the time you're my level, when it's like 31,000 souls to level up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm just like,
but imagine like you were telling me that story in pre-show about trying to get out with 30,000 from wherever.
Yeah.
And if you had that ring.
I was in Sen's Fortress, which is, but you wouldn't keep it that long. That's the funny joke.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know.
Is like you would use it when you like get 500 souls. And you're like, oh my god, I got 500 souls, and you're like, I got to put this thing on.
Yeah.
Whereas and then when you were at 30,000, you'd be like, man, I had that ring. And I saved myself 400 souls once, and then I died and lost them anyway. Yeah, like it's such a
troll.
Gag.
Yeah, it's like the game trolls you left and right. Yeah,
they're very funny that way.
So I have
I was in Sen's Fortress. I'll tell it because it was. I can't believe I got out of this. Sen's Fortress is the area. After you ring the second bell, that gate opens and you can go into Sen's Fortress, which is the area that's sort of connected to the cathedral. It seems like. I'm I'm still not really sure how that all fits. Like sort of in a physical way.
It does connect to the cathedral?
It doesn't connect to the area is called Sen's Fortress, but it's below. It's one level down from the cathedral, right? You remember that Onion Knight?
The
Knight with onion.
I mean, it's connected to where the blacksmith is. Technically, is that what you mean?
Yes, yeah. The bonfire, you go straight away from that, and go into there. So it's this place called Sen's Fortress, and I got to a point where I was like pushing my luck and exploring, and it was like it's more valuable to me. Like an additional level at this point is not I mean, it's valuable, but it's not like hugely valuable. And like you said, the knowledge is the thing that you want to gain. So I started really pushing my luck of just like, well, I'm just going to keep pushing through. I got past a number of challenges. There's a lot of like environment. There's these swinging pendulum axes. And I mean, it's a really rough space and you got to like really be careful constantly. And I managed to get really, really deep into this thing, all the way back basically up to where I saw that there was a gray, a fog wall. And I was like, I'm going to die if I go in there. I mean, I'm never going to survive. I was already low. I had very few resources. I didn't have a lot of Estus flasks left. I didn't have a lot of, I may have been out of healing, which is my spell, my miracle. And I was just like, all right, well, I've gone a long way, but I've got like 26,000 souls. Let me just try to get back closer to the beginning so that it's easier to retrieve them. So maybe I can take that pretty sizable haul and level up with it. And I got almost all the way back to the beginning. I went so far back and I was just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. And then I got to the point where I was like, and this is the thing I have to fight with myself all the time, is like rushing.
Yeah.
Because I feel like this goal is in reach, right? And
for sure.
Of course, the funny part is it happened coming back. But I get all the way back to basically the first room with these environmental hazards, these swinging scythes. You'll see them, and it's like Pit and the Pendulum stuff, right? I mean, it's just like these big swinging things. And we've seen it's like Prince of Persia, right? You've seen these things everywhere.
Yeah.
But they're, of course, because of this game, they're much bigger in scale, and like they just feel more terrifying. And I just pushed too far. I didn't pay attention, and I just get totally wiped off a ledge, died in the fall. And then I'm like, but hey, I'm so close to the beginning. Awesome. This is great. I'm really near the gate that I came in. And then one of the first two enemies killed me.
Yeah, we know how this story ends. Yeah.
And I'm just like, it's like, oh my God, I've killed these two particular enemies. There's these two enemies near the beginning of that thing. I've killed them dozens of times, because I've come in here and died in different ways. I've fallen off different ledges, been knocked off of things. Things have killed me. There are traps, different types of traps. And I'm just like, you know what? I can get past these two guys. And then I just pushed too hard. I couldn't just do it one at a time like I'd done every other time.
You probably got cocky too, because you're like, I
wasn't even cocky. I was just like, I want to get them. I want to get my souls back.
I do that all the time. Yeah,
I'm not usually cocky. I'm usually like, I'm so close to my goal.
Yeah, right.
That I push harder than I should. Then my ability will allow me to. So I'm very like, most of the time I'm like, I really actually kind of know my ability, and I don't try to push things harder. I'll pull back and I'll refresh enemies. I'm like, I know I can kill these, so I'll kill these a few times, get even better at it. Like, I'm very methodical at this point.
Yeah.
With nearly 70 hours.
It feels like your build too is it behooves you to be thoughtful about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
My build's pretty spazzy.
Like, I have to run like heck, and those are scary times. But I just was sitting on the couch and just laughing at myself, just like, yep. You sure did that. Like, you could have done a different thing there, but you just like, you had to have your souls back. They were just another 10 feet away. If you could just do this thing you've done a dozen times, sorry. Oh, well, start again. So yeah, that's this game.
Yep, it is. It is. I mean, yeah, it's maybe the knowledge is just what helps me sleep at night. The knowledge point that I make is like, well, I lost all that stuff, but I did learn something, didn't I? It's like, So anyway, I mean, I did eventually. Yeah, I mean, I was proud that the reason I brought up the NPCs in Firelink and kind of exploring some of that stuff is because I did upgrade my Estus. Do you know what +1 Estus does? Like, what it's?
You get more health back from the Estus flask.
But I mean, how much? Like, it's not just one, right? It must be just a certain amount. And they don't really tell you how much an Estus flask gives
they don't really tell you. I've just noticed that, like, I can get more back from an Estus flask.
So
that's really all.
So I think like, so I did. I was very proud because I did kill the moth on the first try.
Amazing.
But like if I think about some of how I approached it and when I finally got there, I have quite a bit of my gear leveled up almost all the way. My dagger is definitely leveled up to at least +5 or to the max, which I know at this point is not that, it's anyway. And then I had the Estus flask, which basically was what saved me. And then I had my bow. So I was comboing.
Oh, you have a bow.
Yeah, I combo with the bow like I do. I don't use it. I probably use it a quarter of the time overall, but obviously with that boss, I was able to do sustained damage as I was waiting for it to, land. So I think in a combo of like 10 plus 1 Estus flasks, because I definitely took a lot of hits, and I think I literally had no flasks by the end, but I just did it enough, and was able to do it. So that was obviously gratifying. And then after doing all of that, and then I got the ring and kind of basically felt like I did most of, other than the Hydra and the Black Knight, I did most of the Darkroot stuff. That I haven't opened the door yet because I can't get 20,000 souls. That's ridiculous.
I did that so early.
I know. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I basically farmed. So the little loop down before you go up to where the Moonlit Butterfly is, there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3,
those
4,
stone
5
guys give you quite a bit.
Guys. Yeah, they give you, I think, 600, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of plus 6, 7, 8 of the tree-like things, the tall shrub things. There's like 8 of those because there's 3 on the way in, and then there's 5 down there, and then there's 2 of the double snake things. Have you found those?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so and there's 2 of those. Those don't give you much. They're like 60 or 72 or something, I think, like that.
Yeah.
But that all adds up to like 3,900, something like that.
That's true.
So I just did that 5 times, or 6 times or whatever, and got enough to get. Plus, there's a couple. There's a few of the tree things getting in there. I don't know if I had even found No, I definitely had found the bonfire behind that wall, but there's, you can pick up others if you want, but that loop I did a whole bunch of times, just to I was farming for poison because I had been to Blighttown, I think, and I was just like, well, you know what? I'm gonna get a lot of poison resistance or poison healing or whatever, and I'm gonna open this door and see what's behind that. So that's a place where I farmed a ton.
Yeah. I mean, if I put my mind to it, I'm sure I could. I feel like because it's 20,000, I feel like they're kind of telling me maybe I'm not it's so far beyond. I don't know. It feels like I shouldn't go in there right now.
The great wolf that I mentioned with the big sword in its mouth is beyond that. That's
how much, but it's not just him. Is there more content beyond that though? Beyond him?
There are human ghosts or something that are.
Oh yeah, right. You mentioned that.
That are the ones that give me 1,000, like 2,000, 2,000, 1,000. I think 3 of them give 2,000. One gives 1,000 in that area of. So it's like once you get past that door, it's like farming is kind of easy, really. I mean, if I needed 100,000, it would not be easy. But needing like 30,000, it's like, well, I can get 5,000 or 7,000, I guess, just from this group of things.
Yeah. So maybe that's like a farming door.
A little over 4. Yeah, it sort of feels that way. And then I got a ton from killing the wolf. There's other stuff over there too. I feel like I can't remember exactly. I feel like there's a thing that killed me over there that was really, really fast, and I couldn't get the timing, and I just was like, okay, I'm not going that way, but I don't now remember what it was.
But it's not just a boss fight. It sounds like there's hallways and there's actual content.
Yeah, I mean you do these. It's mostly more forest, of this garden area. So you're kind of in this forest. There is also a huge set of armor over there, which you don't need. You particularly, because you are doing light, that's the Eastern armor set, I think, is where I found that. Where it was this really cool samurai getup or whatever, but it's too heavy for me I don't know, maybe it's not now that I'm like, I've switched to the stone armor, which is quite heavy because I was trying something different. Just like, well, okay, what if I tried more physical defense and, and just like, and holding my shield up more and just like, could I get through more things more quickly? And honestly, I think I am. So yeah, there's, although one of the bosses that I've sort of first time killed, I think was partly because I was fast. So it's like, it's a constant battle of like, do I want to be nimble or do I want to be stocky? So it's
impressive that it is so drastically different, and that, that you can, one, that you can kind of decide somewhat. I know that stats wise, you can't really do that, but because you're going to level where you're level, but the fact that the gear can have such a big impact on things, I think it's definitely impressive.
Yeah, it was more than I expected. It's mostly just the weight, because that changes your, I don't think I've leveled up this stone armor at all, but it's better than my other armor substantially. My studded leather or hard leather or whatever it's called. So it's like I've gone and it's just a weird decision to be like, you know what? I'm going to change how I play.
Yeah.
70 hours in or 60 hours in or whatever it was, where I'm like, I'm going to experiment with this other thing. And to have it be so drastically different and actually successful, like it's worked pretty well. Like I feel like I've killed things pretty quickly. There are some things where I'm like, oh, I bet I can do this thing now that I've had trouble with.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been really, really wild. And it's not a total respec, because
you're like, still
my strength. I do a lot of damage if I hit, especially if I counter, I parry. I do like 600 points of damage or something like that to some of the humans, these human ghosts and stuff like that. So I do a lot of damage when I hit hard. Like if I really hit hard. Actually, the way that I do that 4,000 or so XP run with the stone guys and the trees, I just switched to two-handed mace holding. I don't use my shield at all. I just run around and like they stand up, I whack them, they go down. I run around just like, so it's like I'm getting to that point where it's like the fact that I've spent a lot on strength and faith, which because I'm using a divine weapon, the faith actually improves my weapon damage. I just run around and it's like, bop, you're down. Bop, you're down as soon as you stand up. Like, it's just, because it's two-handed. So it's like, there's a lot of things now where it's like, if I want to just go spend time on souls, like if I'm willing to go spend half an hour to gain a level or two levels probably, it's easy to do that for me. So it's like, you get to this point where it's like, you can self-balance the game.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this thing is really, really hard for me. I could get good, as it were, and try to really learn this thing's attacks, or I could just go get a bunch of levels to do whatever.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about that with Elden Ring specifically, where because of the open world nature, people are grinding a lot, which is nice that they have that option. Yeah,
I think they also their grinding is not like repetitive in the same way. Like you can just go off because they have so much content.
Yeah.
You can actually just go see a whole bunch of new stuff and still be leveling in that way, in a way that you can't with these older games.
Yeah. A small version of that feeling, which we talked about in pre-show that I have appreciated is, now I'm at the point where Undead Burg and Parish are obviously, I can still mess up, but generally trivial. And so the concept of just like, there's been a couple times when I've just been farming or whatever, and I just clear both of the whole sections, and it just feels so good to just, to be that sort of powerful and to feel, that sense of like accomplishment and like these areas that were, for me at least, really in the early game, hard and terrifying and took so long to get through, like Parish specifically. Now I'm just going through and cleaning house, and it's a neat difficulty progression to experience, to have that sort of sense of gratification. You don't get that in very many games because it's often you're just moving on, right? You're just moving forward, and
there's one thing it reminds me of actually is, and this might strike a chord, but in WoW,
Mm.
where you have to, like, sometimes you're crossing through places you've been to get to some new area that you can get to now, or that is appropriate level for you now. So you might like be strong enough to, I don't know, get to Molten Core or something like that, and you have to go through, what's the place with all the undead, Ravenwood or something like that. Whatever it's called.
I'm forgetting. It's an alliance zone, so
right, of course. So but you just like, you run through here and it's like you just one shot enemies, you know. And so it's like, oh, just like hit this thing with my sword, it kills it, you know, as you're running through and you're not picking up the loot or whatever. You just like, this is just annoying me as you run past things, you know. It never gets, I think, to that point with this game, but it's the same sort of like, oh yeah, I know this area. Like, I got this. Like, I can just run through here. And if I make a mistake, no big deal. Whereas any place you're new to, you're like, I make a mistake, I guess I'm running back to my corpse, you know, because you're probably in trouble.
Well, that's a good analogy, because I feel like the respawning and persistence in an MMO is, you know, it's like what they do in this game with respawning. It's not persistence, but because everything respawns every time you rest, essentially, you know, it kind of resets the world. And so and because it's not open world, if you do want to get from one bonfire to another, you have to go through areas somehow, you know, and the shortcuts obviously help as you open up more and more of those. But still, there's going to always be some place you're going to have to go through to get to one of the bonfires. So it's really fascinating world structure. Speaking of shortcuts, like, obviously I've opened up more, like the bottom of the watchtower from the moth, the couple ways you get out of lower undead burg, like coming up to the aqueduct, the like sewer aqueduct thing that leads back to Firelink was just like brilliant. Yeah, it was just like, what?
That was a moment where it's like, no way.
Yeah. You're like, that, and then there's a vendor there too, right? So it's like, you get the double whammy. Vendor, and so it's just, and that also connects.
She also, by the way, so you know, she sells the thing that reverses curses.
I saw that. Yeah, I did see that. Yeah, which is
that was the one place where I've gone. It's like, oh my god, 6,000, you know, souls for this. And then after I got cursed, I was like, yes, please, I'll pay 6,000 for that.
That's rough. Yeah, that's crazy. But I guess having some...
now I just don't see those things. Like I can avoid them if I want to go back that way. But that is actually one of my favorite bosses so far, is that gaping dragon, which you'll eventually see. I just love that thing. Is so, it's terrifying. Like, I mean, it's just absolutely horrifying and scary, but it's also just like, it's so original. Like, it's, you'll see it, and I don't want to like give it away, because it's just such a thing when you see some of the bosses where you're like, oh man, like, I don't feel bad telling you what Quelaag looks like, because I'm like, okay, this is low rent, you know, whatever, Shelob or Lolth or something like that. It's just like a really gross, fiery, nasty spider. Like, okay, whatever. But like some of these other monster designs, I'm like, that is really, I mean, yes, terrifying as a player. It's like 30 times my size, which is also just kind of amazing in and of itself. But also, it's just like, wow, like it's so terrifying and weird, but also it's just strangely beautiful. Like, you almost feel bad killing some of these things. I felt bad killing the wolf. You know, it's like, wow. In fact, I have a note. I did have one
Shadow
thing
of the Colossus.
I killed the first time, and I was like, all right, so I will excise the swear words in it. But in the Demon Ruins, which is past Quelaag, with some serious fiery Cthulhu-looking excrement, long spiked tentacles that remind me a little bit of the puzzle spikes in Half-Life, but like all aflame. And then I got closer to this thing, and I took a second note, and it was like, oh my god, it even looks really sad. Like, it doesn't quickly attack you, and you have like a lot of space to move towards it. So you can see it's got these horns and like all these eyes on it, but also it's got this mouth that just looks sad. It just looks like it's moaning in pain. And I'm just approaching this creature. Of course, my next note is like, oh my God, I one-shotted it. But like approaching this thing and like stepping up, getting closer. I didn't have this quiet ring. It just wasn't doing anything. And then beyond it, there's a treasure. You take the treasure and it activates this boss. But like, I got this time to really appreciate how horrifying.
Yeah.
Because it's got all these, I mean, it's got like probably 12 spikes sticking out of it that are all these, it's just crazy scale, like a lot of this game. But also, it looks really sad. Like it just looks like it was something noble once. Like it was something that was good and pure and has been made into this, like this awful thing. And it's not happy about it. And it just feels the burden of its despair every moment of his existence. And I don't think of that as a thing I feel when I play video games, first of all. Like, that I look at a thing as like, this is a thing that is despairing over the fact of its continued existence. Yeah. That is not a thing that comes to mind. And then, of course, it like became an actual boss that I actually had to deal with. I was like, oh, this is like a moment of like world building of like, not everything's gonna kill you, until it of course then did. So it was also like, there was also a joke of it, sort of like, not really a joke, but just like, haha, like this game does these things that are just not things I see in other games. The art presentation is one thing, but also just like the actual experience of that moment, of the actual mechanics of it, of like, oh, okay, I went past it, I got this thing, and that woke it up, and I was like, no, you can't have that. Like, oh, this is my purpose or something. Like, oh, at least I get something to do. I've been sad all this time, but now I can do this thing. And then to kill it on the first try. I mean, it was just like, it was this amazing, I don't know, 15 minutes of play. It was probably not even that. It was probably like 5 minutes of play. You know, I spent a lot of time just looking at it, honestly, because it wasn't attacking. It was like, wow, look at that thing on the PS3, no less. You know, just like, wow, that is an amazing, amazing thing. And its name is so gross. Its name is the Ceaseless Discharge.
Oh my gosh, seriously?
Yes. And I was just like, ew, see your doctor about that. Like, I mean, it's just like, it's so like, you know, it's like other things that have cuter names took me way more time. The butterfly, for example, you one-shotted that, but I didn't have a ranged attack.
Yeah, that's to be really rough without a ranged attack, I think.
Pinwheel was this other thing that I fought. I think I killed it the second time, maybe the third. It was pretty quick. But no, it was the second time. I did that pretty easily. It was the same sort of thing where it's just like, oh, what do I do? And then I was like, oh, okay, it wasn't too bad. Might have even been the first, now that I think about it. You know, so it's like, there's been a lot of things where it's like, I just kind of charge in and do things, but you know, there's been ones that I want to see more of them. And sometimes that ends up killing me, like with this wolf. So it's just, these bosses can just be so many different things. Like the Capra demon is like, okay, that's a demon. Like, I just want to kill it.
Yeah.
But these, and Quelaag, same thing. It's just, I just want to kill this thing.
Yeah.
There are these other things that I just spend all this time just like admiring, you know, kind of in awe of, and then almost sad. I mean, it reminds me of Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
The majesty of some of them, not all of them, but some of them.
They have an aesthetic overall, not just visually, but just like a tone to at least this world. And I have a vague memory of some Demon Soul stuff, but you know, but this, you know, you can see what a Dark Souls game is, a certain kind of thing, you know, and you can tell that, and everything from the amount of information they give you to how opaque the game is, to the weird NPC interactions that you have that are not typical. It's like, I don't know, there's just like a whole, it's almost like a Studio Ghibli kind of situation, you know, where it's like, you know it when you see it, you know, and I can completely see why these games have been so influential on so many other developers, but also just on players, right? And you see some of these younger developers, especially in the indie space, who, you know, played or have played or even grew up playing Dark Souls or something, and they're
Sure.
making their own games now, and they're like, that's in their blood. These concepts are different from Nintendo concepts or different from Capcom concepts or whatever, and they're so different that people like, I could totally see how people are like, well, this is just a different way to think. And that's okay, and
it's bleeding into some AAA stuff as well. So I mean, indie wise, Tunic is one that I played recently. That I mean, it has its other thing that it's doing, which is this sort of puzzle language book thing with just some extraordinary puzzles. And then, but it is a Dark Souls inflected game for sure. Like people look at it and think Zelda, but I played it and was like, oh no, this is way more a Souls game.
Or Hollow Knight is another one.
Hollow Knight, another one for sure. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. But then Jedi Fallen Order is also it uses a lot of these mechanics as well. And in fact, I started that today. So for an hour this morning. I might try to stream that some this week because it's kind of a pain right now for me to deal with moving the PS3 around and deal with the machines downstairs. I've got multiple computers set up in my basement. There's a long story. It's not important. But I just don't want to deal with having to hook up the various things and stream with a console down there right now.
But you see, so you see the influences you're saying?
For sure.
Already?
I mean, Fallen Jedi, or Fallen Order rather, is you have definitely more block, like it's a whole thing, of course, with a lightsaber that sort of makes sense, but it feels very much like it's a parry, and when you're in melee. There's the same, like when you save, if you rest, if you like heal up and get your resources back, you're basically your Estus flasks. They're not that, but some kind of Bacta, I'm sure. Everything responds. And it tells you. Like, one of the things that it does, I think, is that it does a much better job of presenting the mechanics and being very clear about them, and it, like, literally every time telling you, hey, when you do this, this is what's going to happen. If you rest here, the monsters you've been fighting are going to be back. Everything's going to respond. There's a lot more clarity about that. It's not really, in some ways, it's not really necessary clarity, because once you've seen it a few times, like in Dark Souls, like it's not like you and I are going like, oh wow, I rested at a bonfire, but all the monsters were back, like that.
Yeah, it's
so funny. It's a polishy usability sort of thing, but it's like not really. It's just the thing where it's like, hey, there's this mechanic. Like, we're just going to tell you this mechanic exists, and we're just going to tell you every time. Which is true of some of the environmental navigation. It has a lot of Tomb Raider influence as well. There's a lot of climbing things, or Uncharted, climbing things and like leaping to the thing, and whatever. And I know. But I mean, the Fallen Order has a ton of that, and you're just like, and it's the same thing where it's like, if you climb up on a thing, if you jump to a thing and you don't hit the button, it will tell you the next time, remember, this is the button. There's like just a lot of that stuff. Like, you use the left trigger to grab onto stuff you can climb. For some reason, you forget that. It just tells you, like, oh yeah, remember you can do this. Or if, hey, these things, if you use your Jedi Force powers, you can, slow them down. Like, and it'll just tell you that. Like, and none of that stuff is present in Dark Souls. Which is partly why when I play Dark Souls, I have to play it all at once. This is not a thing I could play an hour a week over the course of a year, because every week I would forget something. So
there's a lot of nuance and different options too with the combat, which we haven't dove into too deeply. But you mentioned two-handedness, which I can even do with the dagger. There's different combos with evade that you can do. There's a lot of options that they don't advertise to you a lot. You can definitely use the sort of like, light, heavy block combo probably and play the game fine. But if you go deeper, so there is sort of like a depth there that's not revealed to you clearly. Right. I've only started recently using parry a little bit more, because I'm a backstabber, so like my whole thing is just get behind them.
Just roll around.
Yeah.
Let them attack, roll around, and I mean,
yeah.
I have fought this ghost character that will do that to me, right? I mean, I've definitely, that has happened to me a lot. I'm not even a small amount. There are other characters who will do sort of power attacks, but that's the one that I often get backstabbed by, and like every time I'm like, that's annoying. Of course, that's how Tim plays. But yeah, for the most part, I'm pretty straightforward. I come up but as I've gotten more advanced, it's like, you know what, I can, in this situation, I will do this because I know using the two-handed will take things down in one shot, and so I don't need to block. Why do I need my shield? I'm just going to wait till they appear, stand up, etc., pop out of the ground. In the case of those tree creatures, I know exactly where they are. I can just go walk up and bop them, and they'll be dead before they'll pop out and die, basically.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that it's more you learn these spaces, and if you return to them again and again, you're like, I know how to do this space, like that mastery you were talking about before. It's not even like if I mess up, I'll be okay. It's also just like, no, I really know this. I can just do this. This is the thing I can do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's one thing that I have not yet felt in Jedi Fallen Order or even Tunic. I feel like it's spread out a lot. There's not a places you return to. It's not quite as returny.
It's like the run-based the nature of it, I assume. Like that you, because it's so punishing and so lethal, you're gonna run stuff time and time again.
Yeah.
And a lot of games are afraid of doing that, right? Like people people think that that's a bad thing, that you don't want people to replay a section over and over again through failure. And that's actually, we've talked about it before. It's like, that was like a no-no, right? It's like, you want the player to always feel like they're empowered and getting better and more powerful. But this game, like you could still mess up and get killed by a kind of a minor character if you're not paying attention,
and lose those 26,000 souls.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
ran all the way back to the beginning. Yes.
So it's a bold move, and I feel like because of their success, not that it's a full reset, but because of their success, obviously, which we've also talked about ad nauseum, is like they've given permission to developers to do stuff like this again, and not feel bad about it. So
for sure,
which is in pace. So is Fallen Order like difficult? Is it? I imagine it can't be a hard game like this because it's a Star Wars.
It's not. It's certainly not this hard by any means, and certainly any of the navigation stuff is actually pretty easy. Although there have been times where I'm like, I'm not sure what to do, and I will not read the fact that I can walk across a beam, which is a whole thing. Like just look down instead. I'm so used to where can I jump to. Yeah. From like a Tomb Raider that I don't tend to look down where can I walk. So it's been really funny retraining my brain for that, and I've only played an hour and a half maybe. But the combat can be, you can push yourself. It's very similar. It's like you have a limited number of health replenishments, and you can refight enemies. There are some enemies that are harder than others. And I mean, there's definitely some very similar sort of vein. You
can opt in.
I would say what is the difference is that early on, there's not a huge barrier to entry to an area. So it's like the skeletons in Undeadburg are tough.
Yeah, right.
Like you might get killed by any one of the, I don't know, first 7 or whatever it is, 8, 9, that take you to that first bonfire in Undeadburg. You might just die any point in there, right? Mm-hmm. And especially if you go off and there's those spear ones, and it's like, now it's a different timing. There's none of that in Jedi Fallen Order. There's no sense of it's pretty often it's like you're pushing in and you're like, oh, I can do these. Okay, I read that. It's a little easier, but it's the same basic framework in terms of the difficulty isn't quite as high. Yeah. But the harder monsters can be quite hard, so and punishing. So it's like you'll see something and you're like, oh wow, that's really big. The other thing too is they're a lot clearer about signaling. So it's like, oh, this attack it's gonna do, they turn the whole enemy like a red color to be like, oh, if you see this red thing, you have to dodge.
Yeah.
Like they're very, very clear about this is a thing that you don't want to have happen. So instead of in Dark Souls, that might happen and you signal for it is really subtle.
Yeah.
And it might be more that you missed the block. And if you miss the block, you are in dire straits, right? Like those knights with the red capes that were really tough early on.
Yeah. It's
like
the
you miss that first stab and it's like, oh, now they do 2 other things and you're probably dead. Whereas in Fallen Order, it's more like, hey, this thing happens. Make sure you're hitting, B twice or whatever it is, to get out of the way.
Dark Souls is a lot more trial and error and like learning based,
exactly.
not telegraphing based. Like there's a telegraph there that you will learn, but it's
exactly.
definitely more subtle.
Yep.
And it's like,
and
I just took a lot of
universal. You won't be able to take that tell and apply it to the next monster.
No,
the next new type of monster, right? It's because they've got some other animation, they've got some other hitch, when they swing a weapon or whatever. And in Fallen Order, it's like, no, they're red, dodge. It's very clear
consistent
in that way,
yeah.
Which is not a bad thing. It's definitely a different flavor, and I think is another way to introduce people to this this more punishing sort of game. So, anyway. Probably a good place to put a pin in it and turn to some feedback.
Yes, let's do that. We're just
after a quick break.
Trundle forward. Yes, let's do it.
Welcome back from the break. Sorry for that quick break. As I keep joking with Tim, I have... No, you guys don't want to know. Never mind.
Yeah, I was thinking this is going to be interesting.
God, do we really want to share this? Anyway, so...
You're old, basically?
Basically I'm old. I'm old. Let's just say I'm old. But we've got some emails that were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. You, sir, have the first one.
Yes, subject is Songs of Recollection. From Gothic Chocobo. Good old Gothic Chocobo. I haven't heard from you in a while. And thanks for writing in. Hey, Brett and Tim. I hope you both are doing well. And congratulations on 300 episodes. The 2 video game franchises that I absolutely love, which we are very well aware of, Gothic, are Pokemon. Because you have given us plenty of opinions about Pokemon,
for sure.
And Bethesda Western RPGs, which I guess I didn't know because he hasn't given us that sort of obsession yet. But
he has for me because when I streamed a lot more, Gothic was off and on, and we would talk about it.
Yeah.
He would mention he was replaying Fallout 3 for the nth time or whatever. Yeah, so yeah, right. I did know that.
So while the post-apocalypse of Fallout is my preferred setting of the 2 Bethesda settings, Morrowind was my first venture into this style of game. A friend lent it to me, and I had no idea what I was getting, what it was going to be like. I installed it and just lost myself into it for weeks. I had also recently bought the acoustic songbook album, which I ended up listening to on repeat while playing Morrowind. While I haven't played Morrowind since, anytime I listen to any of the tracks from that album, I'm instantly transported back to my time running around and swatting mud crabs, having next to no idea what I was doing. I really need to install and play Morrowind again now that I understand the Elder Scrolls formula. Thanks for all the pods, Gothic Chocobo. Incidentally, May 1st is the exact launch date. I read this morning of Morrowind, and so the actual 20th anniversary is coming up. And so,
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I think it was on Polygon. Maybe there's sort of somebody that sounds a lot like Gothic does here, who, a formidable time in their life, and And they were also talking about, as we talked about in the series, that was sort of the formula realized, right? Fully realized that Morrowind was like, sure. Okay,
they were building to that.
They know what they do. They know what they want to do now. They're just going to do more of that and just get better and better and better at it. And so 20-year anniversary coming up. And
so what you're saying was that Morrowind was a birthday gift for you.
Yeah, right. It is. Yes, it is my birthday. Thank you for remembering. And ironically, I did not play it until this year.
Yeah,
so,
this year. Are you going to be going off and hiding off in the woods on your birthday this year?
It won't be on the day of. I'm going to try to do something maybe Friday, Saturday, and then
Okay.
So that. But
I was really just trying to angle around my D&D.
No. I'll be around for that. Things are a little too hot
it's
right now.
A little too dicey. Yeah. I mean, that's partly why I only played 14 hours or whatever of this week. I had to really think through how I was going to, total party kill the party.
Yeah, you figured it out. That time was well spent.
It was a good investment.
Yeah, let's just say, folks, things are bad, looking bad. So.
Things are rough. When you send out an email later that night saying, hey, I have this hero point mechanic, that's what that's for. Yeah, it's been a rough session. Anyway, okay. Thank you for that, Gothic Chocobo. Always happy to hear from you, and thanks for the congrats. I have a subject, depth versus accessibility from Artimage, which I will say I have made concise mostly by removing some specific dislike of games that I've personally worked on. So I edited out a bit.
Nice.
I will say this in general, we don't read reviews that are just people hating on how, I don't know, woke we are or whatever. But also I'm not going to read about how you didn't like this game I worked on. That's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. It's not that at all. It's but get your own podcast. Anyway, so I did take out some of the sort of specifics. I think it captures some of the feeling, but it's not quite as, vitriol is too strong, but it takes out some of the specifics anyway. Hello there, devs. So this pairing of games actually works very well to discuss what I'd like to. We have the Elder Scrolls. Each game has been a little different from the ones before. And while Skyrim is inarguably the most successful, I'd say that it was also mechanically stripped down. In all TES games prior, you have a combination of stats and skills when you start. You're someone with a past, and so you have some development to start. And I think that your next choice of game, Dark Souls, of course this came in a couple of weeks ago, expresses this weakness in this stripping down for broader accessibility perfectly. Both games let you do everything, but games with a more robust mechanical system make your doing anything come at a cost that works both in defining the rules of the world of the game as much as the mechanics, but also works to tell the story of your character. And the stripping down of these systems really takes away from a more rewarding experience. Yes, games are a business and need to make a profit to keep getting made. But how long can your audience take this talking down pandering before we see another oversaturation crash like in 83? All right, let's narrow this down to something you two can address. Where do you think the balance point is? What concessions do you think more games should make to stand out with deep systems while still drawing in a wide enough audience to be considered a success to the non-creative overlords who give money to get more? Eternally rambling, Artimage. So I cut out some sort of specific stuff about Skyrim and Fallout 3 there, because I actually think it started to obscure the point at a certain point, honestly. But the sort of question of hey, how far do you? And there's some sort of usability stuff, but also how far do you weaken and water down these systems? The Fallout 3 stuff he was specifically talking about is dialogue options are shown to you but grayed out when you can't do them because you don't have some stat or some, feat or something. So they're sort of specifics about each of the games that I've worked on at the Elder Scrolls at Bethesda. About sort of specific mechanical changes that are this kind of waters it down, and you don't know it's there if you don't play it multiple times, etc. So I don't know. Where do you? I would say obviously the industry quote unquote watering these things down hasn't hurt things. The Skyrim alone sold more than the Dark Souls series has together. Like, so it has worked out. Like, so I don't think there's a real risk of sort of an oversaturation crash. Clearly, the growing demographic of gamers has actually enjoyed the more accessible games. So it's like only those of us who have been playing for decades that sort of feel this change. Like, people who are coming to it are like perfectly okay with it, is my opinion, and are happy with it. And maybe they go and find things that are a little different, you know. But I don't think it's really hurting us like it did in '83, which is totally different problem back in '83, which we can talk about another time if we ever do Atari games again. Anyway, where do you think the balance is?
Well, I mean, it's kind of $1 million question. So like, I don't know if I can answer it succinctly, because it's like, if I could answer that question, then then it's like, you know, I was about to say I should be running a company.
Oh yeah,
but yeah. But
I mean, thank God you're not.
Yeah, I know.
Oh shoot.
Yeah, exactly. Whoops. No, it's just I mean that abstractly, of course. I'm not talking about Twin Suns, but I'm just saying, like, I just mean that there are so many variables that contribute to that question based on every project / business model / goal for a team or a company or a project. And what I mean by that is, like, it kind of depends on like, Skyrim has an audience, but like we just were talking about with the previous letter, it was an iterative journey for them. They found their formula, and then they kept refining the formula, and they knew they had a core audience. But I mean, you tell me, but it's like, each one kept getting bigger and bigger. But like, Skyrim blew up in a way that, was it the plan? I think they just kept doing what they're doing.
No,
like,
it was not. I mean, it was not even. I was actually talking to somebody today about this on the team, and saying, we didn't know 6 months before it came out if it was any good.
Yeah, exactly. You said that, like, before.
I mean, you're so far removed at that point from what a first player's experience will be, that you don't even know. Like, you're just so numb to it. Like, I have played the section from after character generation to Cargen, as we called it. So after, like, all that thing with the dragon appears, Alduin, I guess. But after that whole thing, I've played that down through Riverwood, I guess it's called, and then the deep whatever Barrow. And I've played that whole section, which takes about 20 minutes when you're good at it, thousands of times. Like, I am completely numb to the game. Like, it's not, at that point, it's just like, are there new bugs here? Was literally all I was looking for, because I'd make some code changes or like do some optimization or whatever. Like, is it faster? Does it take more memory? Is there a new bug that I introduced? No, I guess not. I guess I'll check in. Like, I'm at the point at that, you know, when you've done something hundreds of times where you're just like, this isn't even a game anymore. Like, I don't, there's nothing like what a player is experiencing when you do that. And yeah, so like what I was saying is, like, basically we had no idea that it would connect.
Yeah, you've lost perspective on it.
No perspective.
Yeah, and the reason I was bringing that up is that it's like, where I got to is that generally you should try to think about who your audience is as best as you can. Mm-hmm. And you talk about, and then you think about your goals and your pillars and what your business model is. And so these variables that are fairly obvious, I guess, you know, for most, but you kind of stay true to that audience, like, and go for what you're trying to go for. And you do expand to some degree, but I think it's really interesting that he's talking about Dark Souls in the same breath as the Bethesda games, because it's like there's breadth and depth. Like you know, Skyrim, maybe there isn't the mechanical depth of Dark Souls, but where people get overwhelmed, including myself, which I talked about on the Morrowind series, is more of like how much there is, right? Like they hit you over the head with, or, you know, you, I guess, but they hit you over the head with the amount of content, right? And that you can go anywhere and do anything. And Dark Souls is like, we talk about the mechanical depth and the difficulty, and the like, even one minion can take you down, and that's overwhelming in a different way. Like, I guess it's quite a big game as well, but it's like they stayed true to that. And I mean, I don't want to sound too cheesy about it, but it's like, I don't think there's one answer to his question, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, it really is very variable, and it really has a lot to do with even the market, like where the market is.
Yeah.
But as far as like how much do you water something down, it really, I think, has to do with who you're making the game for. Even if it's for yourself, like if you're making the game for yourself, then you know the answers. But if you're making the game for a certain, and again, Skyrim, I assume the goal was make the game for people who love Elder Scrolls. It wasn't make the game for all these new people that don't even know what it is. And they stayed true to that, and they watered it down as much as they needed to, but
I mean, and again, as I said in the Morrowind series, I don't think it was really watering down. It was like, it's more usable, Some of these choices we've made before are not really important to us. Like, I will say, I do think that is a studio that makes games for themselves.
Yeah.
Which is funny because, of course, by the time it comes out, like, your sense of the game is totally lost. Like, you're like, I guess this is for me in theory, but like, I've played it so much I don't even know. Because, of course, you're seeing every iteration of every idea in the game so much that, like, you didn't ever have the experience of playing it the first time as a finished thing. Yeah. Right? Which is just the weird thing.
It's the weirdest thing.
Like, it's the hardest thing. And the one balance point I will throw out here, because I mentioned it already, is like, and it's something you and I have experience with, is like, with Republic Commando, our choice was like, let's make a shooter for a Star Wars audience, not let's make a Star Wars game for a shooter audience.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
And that sounds like, what are you talking about, Brett? That's no different. And it's like, no, actually,
it's very different. Well, and we just talked about that with Fallen Order. That's literally...
that's what I meant. Yeah, that was the other example I was going to make, is like, let's make a Dark Souls like for a Star Wars audience, and that's what they're trying to do. I mean, it's not apples to apples, and our game wasn't apples to apples either. I mean, it's
you're taking things that make sense for that audience and introducing them to different things. I mean, I've heard Fallen Order multiple times described on podcasts or whatever of like, if you're not sure about Dark Souls, but you kind of want to dabble and you kind of want to see sort of a little bit of what it has to offer, but in a little bit more of a mass market kind of way, you should play Fallen Order. Like people say that all the time.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's like, hey, you like Star Wars, and you've been curious about this Dark Souls thing you hear all the time, like, this is the game for you, for sure.
I'm sure people like Dark Souls hardcore fans play Fallen Order and they're like,
what's the point of this?
Yeah,
like,
my
come on,
gosh,
it turns red when
babies.
I'm supposed to dodge. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like that's the change in aesthetic that they're like, you know what? Some of these things are really hard and obtuse and won't reach a wider audience. I mean, there's a reason why. I mean, I looked up numbers for Dark Souls versus Skyrim, and it's like the series for Dark Souls is like, the last number I had was 27 million. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of copies, but it's 3 games. And Skyrim, it's like, and this is maybe 5 years old, is like 30 million for the one game. It's just like, yeah, you know what? I mean, they want to make this thing that
Skyrim's way over that by now, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, it's been another 5 years, but again, none of these numbers are like really recent, because those numbers are hard to get. But I literally looked it up when I was copying this email out to read, and I was like, yeah, I mean, it's like, again, they weren't trying to reach. We didn't think we were going to reach that kind of audience.
You're saying there wasn't the usability decisions that were made were not to try to reach a broader audience. They were just making the game. They're literally just to
make more the game. Yeah, make the game better. More like what we wanted it basically to be. Yeah, better in the way we understood better, for sure. I think that there were things that we tackled that also made that the case. Like, I mean, just like I mentioned in the Morrowind discussion, like, I think the dragons are just a really, really good dragon. Like, it just feels like, wow, this is a really cool thing I've never done before. And I think that really helped. But there were other things that really helped, that just the really good mix of the next POI that's on your compass, and like, oh, I should go there, and just like constantly chasing that stuff if you're an explorer. And yeah, I mean, if you're a questline person, you want to go be the Assassin's Guild, there are cool storylines there. I mean, there's stuff for every type of player. And while there's stuff for every type of player in a Dark Souls game, it's not quite as far ranging in terms of ease of use. So
yeah.
I will say that one of the things I did also cut out in this is that he had actually said, like, Artimage had said, like, Dark Souls could totally be fine with a difficulty slider. Like, it would be fine, which I also agree with. But he also was like, you know, hey, it's not about the difficulty slider, but I also think there's some opacity here that is kind of standoffish to players in a way that you know, the sanded down edges of the later Elder Scrolls games, you know, is not. So
wait, so is he was making, so is he pro Dark Souls opacity or against Dark Souls opacity?
He is pro. I would say he's pro some of the, like, hey, these choices you made are really important, you know. So he's talking about, like, in Morrowind, I chose the battle mage with the particular star sign I was born under, and that made a huge difference in my play.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that to him is a really important choice. And, you know, in Skyrim, that's not the case.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's a little more. Yeah, no, I get it. There's a commitment to it, right?
Right.
Yeah, which I do appreciate, and I just think there's a place for both. I just think the point. I think we're pushing back on the fact that it's that he's sort of hindsight 2020ing Skyrim and saying that they sanded things down
It went too far
to make it more accessible to a broader audience, but they didn't. They sanded things down to make the game better in their opinion.
Yeah,
and it just ended up resonating. So versus we have multiple examples of Miyazaki, that's his name, right? Miyazaki. Of saying, like, holding the line on certain decisions, whether you agree with it or not, because they're making a certain kind of game. And yes, those end up resonating. But to your point on copies, like, the coup de grace for them is Elden Ring. Like, that thing is still bestseller on multiple charts.
Which
and it's like, well, they've been the Dark Souls games sold a fair amount collectively, but they've been building up to Elden Ring, and that was their
in the same way Skyrim did.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
In the same way that Skyrim did. It's like in the Bethesda games built to Skyrim, and I don't know, Fallout 3 or 4 or whatever you want to pick as the one. Like, they have a bunch of games that they built up to their sort of pinnacles, and the same thing happened with just sort of tweaked different aesthetic choices that they wanted to make with the Souls games from Software. You know, from the 4 Souls games, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and then Elden Ring. So whatever, that's 7 games. And then, you know, the same thing could be said of Bethesda. It's like, you know, all the mainline TES games, and then the Fallout 3 and 4. You know, it's the same number of games. You know, so it's like, well, you know, where did they end up? So yeah, I don't know that there's a balance point. It's a thing. I mean, I think about the Fallen Order, and it's like, okay, yeah, but a thing that they didn't do in Fallen Order is, like, make you be able to make your own character.
Yeah.
Right. That's another way that they pull it back to something that's a sort of more appreciable to a lot of players, is like, no, there's one story I'm telling here. Or maybe there might be multiple. I have no idea.
Well, that allows them to
like
focus.
Light side, dark side. But yeah, that lets them sort of like say, you know what, we're not gonna.
And they can
They
can put the polish in.
There's
other
some
places.
of that. There's some of that in Fallout 4 as well. Even though you still have a lot of the choices, there are some specific story things that are in that are you know, that they're locking themselves into early on in the game. I mean, from the opening scenes, honestly. So same sort of thing there of you know, like, hey, we want to tell this story. Or we want you to be able to appreciate specific stories, because again, if you don't want to play the main story, play until you're done. And just like with you, it's like, oh yeah, I became the leader of the Assassin's Guild. I'm good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like play the game you want to play. So there's also that as a total different sort of choice. So,
well, and it was to your point about not making an RPG character in Fallen Order. Like the choice they made there, obviously, probably a lot of it's narrative driven or Star Wars franchise driven, but also the amount of work that they would have put into multiple classes, they can now put into the other places of polish. Because all of that stuff, and the crazy cool thing about Dark Souls to me too, like we were talking about today, is just the fact that there basically are so many different characters
archetypes
in this game, archetypes that play very differently in one game. And that is very, very difficult to do, but
yeah,
to polish all of those.
I'm switching archetypes 70 levels in.
Yeah. But to polish all of those, that matrix of all of those, that's like, to polish it, I mean to like a AAA sort
a real sheen.
Yeah, it's very difficult, near impossible. So yeah, so I looked up the numbers. You're right. They claim that it's at 30 today still. Skyrim. But it's, that's like top 20 of all time. And yeah, I'm just looking at some of these numbers for some of these games. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, so that's admirable. Tied, ironically, with a Pokemon game, roughly.
Sure.
And,
I mean, I'll take that.
Yeah. And yeah, Modern Warfare.
We did just as well in Fumitsu, as far as I'm concerned. So we were the second game in Skyrim to be all fours in Fumitsu.
Oh, really? Wow.
Second Western game, I should say.
Oh.
After Uncharted 2, I think. So.
Oh, nice.
That's one of those. I'm saying that just because that's one of those things, and I'm like, yeah. Like as a developer, I'm just like, oh yeah, like, we did that well in Japan, because I've had other games come out in Japan that did not do that kind of numbers. Anyway, I think the Starfighter games were like in the low 30s, like 34 type, which is also perfectly fine. But at the time, for sure, like not something I sneeze at, but like I think back on the things that we did with Skyrim. There were a ton of like American Game of the Year awards. I loved being up on the GDC stage, but also like Fumitsu, like. Dang, that was when that came out. I was like, oh man. Okay. Anyway, enough of that. Let's just go to our outro. Thanks for your email to devgameclub@gmail.com. Of course, we also love to have your reviews, even your singing reviews, which have lit our work Slack on fire a little bit over the last few days. Thanks, folks, for
I don't know what you're talking about.
Nope. Tim doesn't want to talk about our Metal Gear things at all. But thanks for sending those in. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And we both occasionally stream on Twitch. Tim at Tim Longo Jr. at Twitch, and me at Brett Duvilmo _. You are considering your next game, and I will probably try to get to some Fallen Order this week on Twitch. That'll be fun. That'll work out well. So
cool.
I'm curious to see what you do. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, of course, is by Mark Garcia. Have fun powering up your Estus flasks this week, and good night.
Good night.